Hello and welcome to yet another Cloud Solution Architect Career Series discussion. Today I'm going to talk about native cloud. What do you get as part of the cloud when you move your workload to the cloud? And what I'm going to cover here mainly from a migration perspective, when basically you take an approach of uh, moving an existing on-premises application to a cloud. You have a lot of baggages along with that because it has been running for some time on premises, and now you want to run it as is without interrupting the regular day-to-day business into cloud. Hence, you tend to avoid making so much of changes, which is absolutely fine because at any given point in time, making any specific small change needs a thorough review and test, which involves not only just time, but also a lot of, let's say, buy-in from the business users. You need to train them if there is an experience perspective. Um, Things are changing, etc. So my name is Riju, and I'm gonna walk you through 3 points about it. First of all, my first recommendation is to use the native cloud services, which essentially means that when you move to a public cloud, they not only give you the infrastructure, but a lot of other services around that infrastructure to help you run that infrastructure at a large scale enterprise level. For example, when you, let's say, move your application inside a virtual machine to a cloud, you might need to capture the log, or you might need to protect that virtual machine in certain ways. You can bring in a lot of third-party solutions, which we often use for on-premises, into the cloud and run it because it can run on the same set of virtual machine as before. But then it brings in a lot of other complexities in the sense like even if you are into the cloud, you are trying to make your things quite flexible. But because you are using a public cloud, you already have a contract with the public cloud, and then bringing in other third-party solution to help you run those things makes things more complex because they need separate contract with those individual third-party solutions which you are using, their licenses, their renewal process, their legalities. All these things comes an additional overhead. It's not a technology challenge only, but also a lot of legal aspects are associated to it. So avoid, if you have an option which cloud provides you natively, use that. Avoid using anything which is a legacy thing. So which brings me, and my second point is to leave the legacy footprint behind, which means that if you're using a virtual machine, probably you have been using some endpoint protection in that virtual machine, which you want to continue to use because it is what your IT suggests. But then in the cloud, they also have a first class endpoint protection available, which you can adopt and check the capability, understand which that will fulfill your business requirement. Are they at par with what you have been using? Then go ahead and do that because then you don't need extra management for doing those setups. They're already available. Probably it's a configuration away. Some checkbox needs to be added into the system, some script needs to be run, and then everything will be in place. Data will be collected properly, dashboard will be available to you. You don't have to manage that infrastructure for your security solution, so on and so forth, right? So don't carry your legacy. And the third point, which I wanted to cover here, is to minimize the management task, which essentially means that when you move into the cloud, look for something which is a first class native cloud service. Instead of managing as is kind of solution, right? Putting or installing things into virtual machine, can you move it inside of a service, which is sort of like, let's say, if you think about a lot of application today in the enterprise scenario uses SFTP. And SFTP generally have seen that people build a virtual machine, create an SFTP server, create a redundancy of that virtual machine to make sure if one goes down, other is up and running. There's a load balancer sitting on top of it, and then they manage it for simple file sharing per activity. Can you take some cloud native service which provides you SFTP as a service, and you don't have to really think about the server thing here or configure them? Can you move your database as a platform as a service database where you're not going to install the database, upgrade the database, patch the database, and back up the database? It will be handled by the native cloud service. If you have a website running, can you move that website into a website hosting service where your website code remains the same, but you don't have to really go inside a terminal and configure the web server by yourself? Can you do that? So all these things are the things which you need to really think from a design perspective when there is a cloud movement happening. For any new application, we start from a blank screen, so it becomes easier to pick and choose something which is native in the cloud provider. But when it is a legacy application, there are a lot of baggages, and because of which we tend to continue to maintain them exactly as is, can add to a confusion. But at times, I have seen organizations have their guidelines of specific services. Do challenge them, ask them the question like, what do you think this service cannot do, but the other one which you wanted to us to implement can do? Can we do a feature parity? Can we look for a long-term solution where we know that if we want to move the application today into this cloud provider, there's a long-term goal, and hence this cloud provider is providing us this solution should be a long-term one as well. So let's stick to one vendor, one cloud policy, and then it becomes easier for us to manage from an application management ops perspective to maintain the licenses, etc. In fact, most of the time, these are all consumption-based model, which means that you don't have to buy additional licenses. The amount of data, transaction, etc. you are doing, depending on what kind of service you are using, you basically will be spending time on building things up, which is mostly user experience, not from an how to build them, but more on a what to build them. So it's like moving towards the end user experience from an infrastructure management. So that's why my management overhead reduction point really stays strong here, with all the native cloud services being to be used in your solution. Legacy footprints cannot be removed from the day one, but have a strategy around reducing it going forward, so you can slowly discard one at a time and then replace it with something which is native to the cloud and make a long-term solution for a cloud-based application. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.